Hi everyone, welcome to AgilePath's webinar, 3 Pillars of Cloud Computing Success. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that we'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So as you think of questions, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar panel to send them in, and we'll try to answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. Afterwards, you will be receiving a link to the full recording of the webinar as well. I'm now going to turn it over to Eric Marks, President and CEO of AgilePath.
Thanks, Doug, and thank you everybody for attending today, taking a few minutes out of your summer to listen to a very fun topic today, which is the 3 pillars of cloud computing success. Subtitle, of course, is Ignore Them at Your Peril. And what we'll talk about today is, again, what these 3 pillars are, why they're important, and how they will help your organizations be successful with cloud computing. Let me just page forward. Here's the agenda for today. We've got a little bit of housekeeping work to do, a little introduction. We'll cover each of the 3 pillars in turn, 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about applying the 3 pillars and developing the concept of a 3 pillars roadmap for your organization. And we'll close with some things to do tomorrow. Housekeeping-wise, again, questions and answers at the end. We'll send, upon completion, a live link to replay the webinar, and you can always forward that link out to other colleagues that you know who might benefit from the topic. And then we'll also send copies of the slides. You're also encouraged to get access to the white paper that corresponds with this. It's a brand new white paper developed specifically to address this topic. So let's get into it. Introduction. As we all are watching, cloud computing adoption is accelerating as this space matures, specifically around major cloud service categories like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, etc. The cloud management APIs are still in flux and maturing. Things like Amazon's EC2, OpenStack API, CloudStack, the Azure APIs from Microsoft, etc. And also what's maturing are the management tools to help manage clouds. Cloud governance and cloud management frameworks, however, are lagging behind the pure technology development of cloud computing, and that's going to be a challenge. It's not unusual as emerging technology matures, but these frameworks are critical to success and adoption and managing these complex technology environments. Cloud-centric leadership. That's a term we invented to kind of come up with the attributes of the right kind of visionary leadership needed in the age of cloud computing. It's spotty, and it depends on the company leadership, and it depends on a given organization's overall approach to technology adoption. So what we've done is we've identified 3 pillars of cloud success, which we think are core requirements that will help ensure cloud computing success. The 3 pillars are, surprise, surprise, cloud-centric leadership, number 1, cloud governance, and cloud management. You put those 3 things together, and we feel those are a foundational capability for enabling cloud computing transformation in your enterprise. This slide I use often in our topics and webinars. It's from the Washington Post, and it talks about the impact of Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook on the technology landscape. Not only consumer technologies like iPhones and iPads and things from Apple, and the way we buy retail stuff from Amazon, for example, but they're all bringing one particular thing that they all share, and that's cloud computing capabilities. Every one of these firms is either leveraging or providing cloud computing capabilities. And as these 4 titans of technology continue to pioneer new technologies, we're going to need these 3 pillars to help navigate this very dynamic, changing technology landscape that we're faced with. And it's largely being ushered in by Apple's, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles, and the others who we don't even know of yet that are already probably starting operations. So these 3 pillars are essential. They provide a foundation and an environment to enable cloud computing success via leadership. They help develop policy, oversight, and decision-making transparency that will enable cloud adoption, and that's kind of focused on the governance lane. And lastly, they implement oversight and monitoring technologies and instrumentation that enable cloud operating capabilities to be realized, and that's kind of in that cloud management technology space. These three pillars pave the way to success, and again, as we said in the subtitle, ignore them at your peril. Let's go through each of the three pillars in succession. First, cloud-centric leadership. So the reason that cloud-centric leadership is needed is that IT is continuing to go through this transformative phase where the role of IT is being challenged by the business, where third-party service providers are encroaching on what had traditionally been IT's turf inside of a given enterprise. So IT has to rethink itself, and one of the things that's consistent in our dialogues with the analysts and with IT executives is the transition into a broker and an integrator of IT resources and capabilities. So that means that a given IT shop will not only provide internal IT services that traditionally has provided, but it will also bring through external cloud resources, other outsourcing services, any other third-party services. It will manage those relationships proactively and provide them to the business through a consistent service catalog, if you will. But IT will be out on the front end of those relationships. This means, as the second bullet indicates, that the IT organizations have to be fearless with comparing themselves against outside service providers, third-party companies, et cetera, and has to continually benchmark its pricing, its service delivery, its availability, et cetera, against third-party firms to make sure it can perform at a given service level that will keep the business not only satisfied, but keep the business loyal. So IT has to regain, to some extent, its trusted advisor status that it once had, or maybe it had and it's starting to deteriorate. So the whole bumper sticker at the bottom talks about that IT has to transition into this true business relationship management role, delivering best-in-class services, solutions, and resources, regardless of who the ultimate provider is. That's a kind of a different position than we're used to. What's dominating a lot of the thoughts and minds of IT executives is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This happens all the time as new technologies come to the forefront. The business is really enamored with them, and IT is forced up against the wall to have to deal with these technologies. In the general sense, and you may have heard me say this in previous webinars if you've been on them, IT architecture transitions tend to happen in predictable cycles, about every 10 years, as I'm suggesting here, but they're not predictable in the way that the given technologies emerge and in the way those technologies are applied. So again, every about 10 years, there's some kind of a disruptive architecture transition that happens. That transition has emerged to fix gaps in previous technology trends created or didn't fix at all. But these architecture transitions create their own vulnerabilities and gaps that have to be addressed as well. So every 10 years, a major architecture shift. About every 5 years, there's another technology that tends to pop right in the middle of that 10-year transition, and that is another kind of a technology. Typically, it's not an architecture transition, but it's a front-end technology of some kind that falls in the middle of it. And every 5 and 10 years, we can look at these disruptions. And when you're faced with this kind of shifting IT landscape, IT leadership really has two choices. They can preserve status quo and fight these new technologies, fight off these emerging technologies, and or they can try and embrace these forces of change proactively and try and take advantage of it. And the question is, what choice will a given IT leader make? So cloud clearly is disruptive in nature. It does represent, I believe, one of these big trends of an architecture transition. Of course, we know it's disruptive because anytime something disruptive happens, the first thing we hear people say is, well, it's not secure. or it's not stable, or it's not reliable. So that, to me, those are code words for, yeah, this was disruptive because we always bring the security challenge to the forefront. Down below that are a few reasons why this is disruptive. First of all, business users can consume cloud resources without going through IT. That's a problem for IT organizations, because that, of course, creates the next bullet, which is shadow IT activities. So as the business goes out and establishes direct relationships with various third-party cloud service providers, IT ends up stuck with managing the relationship or doing cleanup if there's some kind of a flaw or vulnerability that's created by that relationship. IT governance, IT acquisition processes, and even IT contracts and procurement processes tend to be circumvented by these business end-arounds when they happen. So cloud-centric leadership is one of those attributes that is absolutely critical to proactively foster and nurture the adoption of cloud computing capabilities on behalf of business users in a way where the business gets what they want just as fast and just as cost-effectively as they would going around IT, but in a way that's governed and managed and secure and reliable. So the bumper sticker at the bottom here talks about cloud-centric leadership being that force that creates an environment that will enable secure, reliable, trusted consumption of cloud capabilities in a strategic and transformative manner for the enterprise. That's leadership. That's cloud-centric leadership in our view. So, the reason that this leadership is important is IT is faced with disintermediation from the business. So the real challenge is, how does the information technology organization remain or become more relevant in the age of cloud computing, given that the business can establish direct relationships with cloud service providers independent of IT? How does IT add new value to the business in new ways that it hasn't traditionally done before? How does IT establish a resource relationship broker kind of a framework where it is behaving as the master, arbiter, and broker of all services to the business in kind of a enterprise services computing relationship manager kind of a role? And how does IT combine the ideas of business relationship management, portfolio management, contracts, acquisition, resource management in a way that allows cloud computing capabilities, as an example, to be delivered seamlessly to the business, again, even though they might be coming from multiple third-party vendors? So unless these questions get answered, there will be this continual deterioration and disintermediation of IT from its business relationships inside of a given enterprise. So this sets up what is a potentially new role that's evolving. It's the whole enterprise business service broker concept. And what I'm showing in the chevrons are a set of activities that might be enhanced or strengthened. Some IT shops are doing some of this already, but this becomes more formalized as a business relationship, business service broker kind of a role. So it's setting up a enterprise services computing strategy, performing business relationship management, managing all the IT resources from third parties, providing a portfolio management model for all the cloud services in conjunction with all the normal internal services IT provides. It's resource brokering, it's integrated resource management, provisioning, all those kinds of things that start to become mainstream with cloud computing accelerating. Down below this are the cloud governance lifecycle steps that would support some of these ideas. If you haven't seen our cloud governance lifecycle webinar or white paper, I encourage you to come back into our website and register your information and go get a hold of those white papers, and you can do a replay of that webinar as well if that's a topic that you're interested in. Anyway, now this may well be the new role for IT going forward. So in support of that, I have developed some cloud-centric leadership principles that I think will help think through, help guide some of the things that IT leadership has to do. So, for example, redefining the role of IT based on a model of integrated resource management, cloud-centric governance lifecycle ideas, and the whole relationship management resource broker model. I think cloud-centric leaders will redefine IT's role as this unified broker of all IT resources, services, and capabilities, irregardless or irrespective of whether it's internal, third party, or other. Cloud-centric leaders welcome comparisons with third-party service providers so they can benchmark internal IT capabilities and use those benchmarks to improve processes, pricing, customer satisfaction metrics, and other things. Cloud-centric leaders will establish internal benchmarks for their cloud services, again, to help compare those with third-party cloud service providers. I mean, why not benchmark internal service provisioning against Amazon and Google just to see how you stack up against the market leaders, for example? Cloud-centric leadership organizations will achieve superior optimization of IT spending by using this blended service provider model and harnessing market economics on behalf of IT, but doing it in a way that's secure, trusted, and governed. Cloud-centric leaders are going to continue to offer differentiated business and IT services to their consumers, both internal and potentially external, essentially creating new revenue opportunities and pathways to innovation. And speaking of innovation, another principle I think that makes sense is that cloud-centric IT leaders will spur innovation within the enterprise by, again, seeking better, unique, and differentiated IT service models, products or services for, again, both internal and external consumers. So these are not an exhaustive list of cloud-centric leadership principles. Build your own, enhance these, add on. The whole idea is that from a cloud-centric leadership perspective, we have to take a different stance toward technology, toward cloud computing, and harness it on behalf of the business proactively because it's coming whether we want it to or not. Now, as an example of an organization that's done this, I use Mohawk Paper as a great example. Paul Stamus is the CIO of this mid-size paper manufacturer. So here I am talking about cloud-centric leadership and cloud computing from a paper company, which is in and of itself amazing. But, you know, Mohawk, from a business perspective, saw the decline of its business model from reliance on traditional use of premium paper products. And so it started a whole business and IT transformation initiative that began with using cloud computing and a service-oriented architecture in the cloud kind of adoption pattern to reinvent its IT organization. So they went from being a classic ERP-driven business-to-business model into a very dynamic collaboration, innovation business model through their cloud computing work. So now they go directly business to consumer. They still go B2B. They go in lots of new ways now because they have an IT infrastructure and that allows them to be a lot more agile in responding to market pressures. So as part of their work, again, the SOA in the cloud is kind of a generic way to describe what Paul Stamus architected and envisioned. But essentially what they built was a business integration platform in the cloud that became the archetype use case for Gartner Group's cloud service broker, if any of you are familiar with that. So the whole CSV idea was established based on the success that Mohawk Paper had. Now, Mohawk was actually interesting for us because they leveraged our cloud computing reference model framework and our cloud computing playbooks to quickly develop their reference model and reference architecture, and it helped them negotiate their service level agreements with their various service providers in support of this model. So in the context of this case study, and to finish it off, Mohawk's CIO, Paul Stamus, demonstrated absolutely cloud-centric leadership and pioneering this whole cloud service broker concept through this transformative effort at Mohawk Paper. So to summarize this first pillar, cloud-centric leadership is needed. It requires being brave and daring in the age of cloud computing, and that's certainly what Mohawk represents. And it requires being proactive in embracing the cloud rather than trying to fend it off. So let's go to Pillar 2. Pillar 2 is cloud governance, and it's something we've talked quite a bit about in the past. Definitions first. Cloud governance talks about the decision-making processes, criteria, and policies that are involved in the planning, architecture, acquisition, deployment, operation, and management of a cloud computing capability. A lot of words, read them real fast. Again, webinar, white papers available if you want to go deeper into this topic or if it's new to you. So what we've done is we've created a cloud governance lifecycle which describes the end-to-end requirements of cloud computing governance, from the strategy, planning, business case activities, to the architecture, to deployment, to integration, switching providers, and eventually, going out of the cloud if that's what you decide to do. So cloud governance and this governance lifecycle become very useful ways to think about this problem. Why do I need to talk about cloud governance? Well, first and foremost, it creates an appropriate decision-making framework without adding friction to your enterprise. That means avoid the slow and no-go kind of stance that a lot of governance efforts are perceived to be. Cloud governance has to be integrated with existing IT governance processes so it doesn't become a governance silo in and of itself. It has to be balanced and provide appropriate coverage for key decisions, investments, and risks. But it has to do those things without sacrificing the business benefits that come with cloud. Kind of a key thing there. I can over-govern and not get a business benefit, or I can govern just enough to accelerate adoption and drive value. Lastly, it's got to be proactive, so it can anticipate and prevent shadow clouds and unauthorized cloud activities that expose organizations to risks. That's something that we've talked about with some major organizations who are adopting cloud willy-nilly, and they don't have a handle on all the risks that they're exposed to. So what we like to talk about is business at cloud speed. So cloud governance enables you to operate at a very rapid and agile time-to-market pace that cloud computing enables, while managing the risks, giving a transparent decision-making oversight to these efforts. There's a bunch of risks associated with no or poor cloud governance. I'll highlight a few. You can read them as I go, but certainly security and compliance risks are always first and foremost in many organizations. Cloud proliferation and sprawl is important. We're already working with enterprises that have as many as 10, 12 private clouds inside of the four walls. We're working with organizations that have, somewhere north of 80 to 90 cloud service provider relationships that have been established by the business and IT. They don't really have a way to manage all of those. Cloud integration, portability, and interoperability are really coming to the forefront now because, the rapid pace of adoption is forcing the API-level interoperability issues to the forefront, and guess what? They're not resolving quite yet. And then when you're working at the platform as a service layer of a cloud services stack, you have more issues there as well. Vendor lock-in, vendor risk management, so on and so forth. So lots of risks associated with poor cloud governance or no cloud governance. And that's the story about it. I've got a pop-up there, and I have Outlook turned off. Anyways, these are things to watch out for in the context of cloud governance. So we created the cloud governance lifecycle to frame the end-to-end set of requirements for cloud computing that kind of bridges consumers to providers and everything in between. So these 5 slices of the pie include strategy and planning and business case development. The next slice down talks about architecture, design, deployment issues. The next slice, of course, talks about acquisition, vendor selection, contracts and SLA negotiations, those kinds of things. The next slice talks about the operational resource provisioning and cloud management requirements. And then the bottom one talks about just sustained cloud operations, service management, runtime management, service desk, ITIL-like kinds of activities. Each of these decompose into a finer grained version of this. Again, if you want the details, go download the Cloud Governance Lifecycle white paper and some of the other assets that describe this. The trick is taking that cloud governance lifecycle and framing it against your enterprise governance processes that are already in place. This generic enterprise governance framework that I'm displaying here is what we use for any kind of governance. It could be corporate governance, IT governance, enterprise architecture governance, SOA governance, doesn't matter. It's in here somewhere. So if I look at all of these gray boxes around this 8-pointed star, that pretty much has every slice of governance involved in it. So how do I take the cloud governance lifecycle above, decompose that into and make sense of it in the context of all of these enterprise governance requirements? Well, the way we do that is with a very robust governance reference model that we have in some of our other artifacts and content. But the governance reference model can be simplified into what we call our SPOT framework. So SPOT describes the scope and stakeholders of a set of governance requirements. It focuses on policies and processes of those governance requirements, the organizations and governance boards that might be necessary, and lastly, the tools and enabling technologies of that governance requirement. In the governance lifecycle, the Cloud Governance Lifecycle white paper and webinar, we applied this SPOT analysis to the 5 tiers of the governance lifecycle. So I won't do that again here, but what I want to do is just emphasize that if you use this framework and the detailed cloud governance reference model, you will arrive at the key levers of cloud governance that we'll be able to apply to your organization. I wanted to highlight, though, some key areas of cloud governance focus that everybody should be thinking about. Certainly, the cloud architecture and management APIs, whether it's a private cloud, a public cloud, or especially if it's a hybrid cloud, you need to pay attention to the management APIs that are involved in the type of cloud that you're using. You may not care that Amazon EC2 is EC2 inside, but you're sure going to care when you're blending EC2 with OpenStack or CloudStack or Azure or other cloud APIs. How do you manage and bridge services across 2 different clouds? That's the challenge. That gets to the second one, integration, interoperability, portability of cloud services, both within clouds and across clouds in the hybrid sense. The maturity of different cloud services varies. So while infrastructure as a service is maturing, platform as a service is very dynamic and immature. Software as a service is the most mature, and big data and NoSQL kinds of ideas are maturing and evolving at a rapid pace. So you have to understand the maturation of cloud services within the NIST tiers to understand what the impact of those are on your enterprise. From a cloud service provider perspective, understanding contracts, SLAs, quality of service, data migration issues. What I mean by that is I put my data in a cloud. I need to make sure in my contract that I write in how I'm going to get my data back if I want to get out of their situation. That's a challenge. You need to be very careful on how you manage getting your data back out of a cloud once you put it up there. Now lastly, and I haven't talked about it yet, but the bumper sticker at the bottom of the slide is very important. The governance requirements of cloud are critical, but you really need to get a strategy and business case in place. They're essential, and they're also undervalued, but they're the things that give you context for actually governing your cloud. You're governing your cloud efforts to achieve a set of business and IT goals, and you're governing your cloud activities to drive a desired behavior. And that behavior is, of course, called sharing of shared resources. So you do need to make sure that you've got a strategy and business case in mind for cloud. That's an undervalued dimension of governance, but very important. So I wanted to share with you all that we're going to be releasing soon a cloud governance lifecycle template that will essentially lay out the cloud governance levers and help your organizations think through and design some of the dimensions of cloud governance. So it won't give you the whole answer per se. It's just a guide and a template that with the addition of a little bit of extra work or so a little bit of additional consulting help and technical assistance can be a way to very quickly close governance gaps in your organization. I'm pleased to be able to say that we'll have this coming soon. Now, case study. Military Health Services was a very interesting use case where they had a cloud-first strategy that was very much aligned with the FedRAMP and federal government cloud computing strategy from a few years ago. But they did something completely different than anybody else. They actually said, we need to get our governance and policy figured out first before we even go forward with the architecture, with implementing clouds, and starting to deploy cloud services. First time I've ever heard anybody do that. So with our help, they were able to, first and foremost, develop a macro-level set of cloud policies that they released to the enterprise that said how they're going to go forward with cloud. And then using our artifacts, we actually were able to get a governance policy baseline using our lifecycle and our playbook work. And that provided the environment and umbrella under which their other cloud activities fell. So, you don't very often get a case where an organization follows an idealized path. Well, starting with cloud governance before you do the strategy, the architecture, the acquisition, et cetera, is pretty unique and novel. So we like to use them as a case study of somebody that did things in a really unbelievably ideal sequence. Bumper sticker at the bottom talks about governance driving behavior, and that's why it was so exciting to have somebody start with governance, because they wanted to get the behavioral model right first before the technology of cloud took over, and that's pretty exciting. Let's go to the third pillar. Third pillar, cloud management. Cloud management is an emerging area in the space of cloud computing. Cloud management really is a critical need for managing and monitoring clouds, for integrating clouds and different cloud capabilities, for provisioning resources within and across clouds, for, again, both private, hybrid, and public cloud scenarios. Cloud management is a key enabler of cloud interoperability, portability, and integration. And as you're getting, and from your own research and from what I've been telling you on this webinar, the cloud management API battles are heating up. We're really seeing with the cloud standards organizations and these various proprietary and open source APIs dominating the market conversation that what your API is matters today. Whether you're going with EC2, again, I mentioned OpenStack, CloudStack as open source versions, public standards of cloud management APIs. There's obviously Azure, and there's a bunch of others. But cloud API compatibility does not ensure the fundamental interoperability and portability of cloud resources across APIs or across cloud stacks. So while you can read, oh, this API will work with that API, you really have to get down to the specific cloud service and what you're doing with it to ensure that you've got interoperability and portability of services, portability of data, portability of cloud services across different cloud stacks. So you're going to have to spend some time as you're looking at clouds and as you're looking at the cloud management tools you will eventually need. Vendor due diligence at a very fine-grained level is going to be very important to you. This graphic is just a very simple view of some of the core functionality of cloud management today. Obviously, again, it's a very dynamic space, but first and foremost, these tools allow you to broker, provision, and mediate cloud resources, cloud services within a cloud, and let consumers access them from the cloud provider. So that's at the heart of what these tools do. They provide, in the second slice down, a set of mechanisms for load balancing, for resource management, And a concept called template orchestration is an emerging concept that these tools enable. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. They support and then build on virtualization technologies using cloud management APIs that essentially helps you create the cloud, the virtualized resource pool from which people consume those resources. On the left-hand side, vertical, these tools provide management and alerting capabilities, so you can actually monitor VMs, you can monitor the different cloud services individually and in the aggregate. You can see how things are trending. So that's where you get your monitoring and alerting instrumentation. And of course, these tools, by virtue of the management APIs, are going to become increasingly important in ensuring interoperability, portability, and integration across different cloud APIs. So that's a very simple version, summary of the core functionality of cloud management technologies today. I encourage you to look at the white paper that has a more detailed description of some of the functional requirements that these things do. For example, they do the metering and billing kinds of functionality that you'll be looking for to meter usage of clouds in support of chargeback models. Again, they do all the load balancing kinds of things. They let you establish a self-service portal mechanism for reserving capacity, doing spot buys of capacity, those kinds of behaviors and interactions. So cloud management is more than just a management process, which most people think of when you hear management. Cloud management in this case is focusing on the enabling tools and technologies that let you manage clouds internally and manage multi-hybrid cloud, multi-API kind of cloud scenarios. Now, this picture that I'm showing you here is a reference model that we developed for working with one of our clients. It's an aggregate cloud computing reference model that mashes together Agile Path's framework, the NIST model, IBM's model, I forget the fourth one, but basically it's an aggregate view of all the cloud reference models that are out there. And what I'm showing here, highlighted in the red outlines, are the areas of the reference model that are impacted or enabled or touched by cloud governance and what you can, or by cloud management tools, I'm sorry. And what becomes very obvious from this picture is on the left-hand side, the whole cloud economics framework is managed by cloud management tools. What I mean by that is cloud management tools fundamentally connect consumers and providers together via a brokering mediation role. And that's what drives the business case of cloud. A consumer and a provider have to connect to enable services to be consumed and provided. Management tools enable that interaction. In the governance and security and privacy areas, moving left to right, those are all touched and enabled by cloud management tooling and infrastructure. In the center, under the cloud services enablement piece, all of the infrastructure as a service layer is driven and enabled by cloud management APIs to begin with. Other cloud services build on top of that. So when I talk about Amazon EC2, OpenStack, CloudStack, Azure, Eucalyptus Systems, which is using their own reverse engineered Amazon APIs, those are all enabling infrastructure as a service. Cloud management is the forefront there. And then continuing, cloud management, of course, those topics are all part of the cloud management space. And then governance and operations and operational support are also enabled by cloud management tools. So what this picture suggests is you can't do a whole lot in the cloud without at least having some kind of a management framework in the mix. It's going to become more and more critical as you adopt more cloud services, as you go more hybrid cloud, and as you have to start to integrate different types of cloud resources into an integrated solution. These management tools are going to be critical for that. So it's a nascent but critical discipline. What you're going to find is comparing tools, apples to apples, is not going to be easy. You'll also find that management tools within a given cloud API are very good. So VMware's management tools we think very highly of. VMware's management tools for managing EC2, OpenStack, and and vSphere's cloud, well, they're not as good at multi-API cloud management. The new domain and horizon for cloud management tools is not only managing internal to a given cloud API, but managing and brokering resources across APIs. So it has to address a broad range of capabilities, not only just the performance monitoring and VM management of a given cloud. So as the bumper sticker at the bottom points out, these cloud management tools have to support hybrid, multi-cloud, and multi-API cloud environments. That's going to become the most important functionality. A bit on cloud management and template orchestration. Template orchestration is kind of state-of-the-art today for managing and provisioning cloud services to consumers. If you think about a cloud template, it's basically a package or a way to package and integrate different cloud resources into a consumable bundle based on this template and based on the cloud APIs that are involved. So a cloud template lets me package up different pieces of infrastructure as a service and other cloud services, and I can access every one of those cloud services with a single call to the template, and then the template actually takes care of all the back-end provisioning of each of those individual cloud services. So it's like a composite cloud service, if you want to think about it that way. These templates orchestrate the automated provisioning of the predefined resources in a given template based on the cloud API. So cloud management platforms and the cloud templates that they support are going to enable hybrid and multi-API cloud integration in the future. And there's a lot of examples of these tools popping up: Amazon's CloudFormer, RightScale, Kavo, and there's many others. Again, what you'll want to watch for are the management APIs and the template orchestration within a given cloud stack, for example, VMware, but also look for the cloud management tools that support cross-cloud template orchestration. So that's an emerging space. It's starting to become state-of-the-art to do template orchestration, and cloud management tools are what enable template orchestration. So an interesting case study on this topic is Air Force. They actually asked us to help them a few years ago do a market space analysis of cloud management tools with the idea that they could establish a catalog of predefined profiles. That was the term that Air Force used, but profiles has been replaced by the concept of templates in the commercial cloud industry today. But the same idea was in play. These templates or profiles would provision cloud services based on various consumption patterns. So in their mind, they would have templates that would map to ERP systems, and those ERP systems would provision software licenses, platform as a service capabilities, various infrastructure as a service capabilities, all as a single bundle that would map to an ERP requirement. By the same token, a mission service would require a different pattern of cloud services orchestrated in a profile or a template. And so their vision was to have a catalog of these templates predefined, pre-tested, pre-QA'd, and more importantly, accredited in a federal government context so that they could actually start to provision infrastructure resources using this idea. So we did the study, did the work, actually built for them a technical architecture and a profile catalog framework that is still ahead of the state-of-the-art in the industry from our view, and industry is starting to catch up with these ideas, and Air Force is still, of course, formalizing more of its cloud strategy in parallel with DISA, who is the service provider for the Department of Defense, doing its cloud computing work. But the net is that this whole concept of profiles or templates is going to increasingly be the way by which you consume cloud resources from providers, and it'll be the way by which, from a private cloud perspective, you provision cloud services internally to your enterprise. So, based on everything that we've talked about, I'd like to shift into the ideas of developing a 3 pillars roadmap for your enterprise. So in order to create a 3 pillars roadmap for your enterprise, of course, you've got to sequence things that are appropriate for your organization. Now, we've started with leadership, then governance, then management. You might have a different sequence based on your given organization, but without knowing anything more, we would always say start with cloud-centric leadership activities. Set the environment, set the vision, formalize the cloud strategy, goals and objectives, and more, and critically to that is get a business case so you know why you're doing cloud and for all the right reasons. Then shift over into the governance swim lane and start to define the broad guardrails for cloud and the desired behaviors that you need to have to help realize those business benefits. Again, we would encourage you to consider that SPOT framework. Again, go look at the Cloud Governance Lifecycle webinar, and you'll see how we did a preliminary decomposition of the cloud governance process requirements. And then lastly, start looking at the cloud management requirements and the enabling technologies that will meet today's needs, but just as critically, enable future portability, interoperability, and all of the features and benefits of hybrid clouds that will be the norm rather than the exception soon. So the net here is we suggest that you use your 3 pillars roadmap as a high-level framework to guide the overall realization of your cloud computing strategy. So the strategy itself will have goals and objectives specifically defined. Use the 3 pillars roadmap as kind of the very simple guardrails for your IT for the cloud computing strategy. So let me finish with a couple of things. First, some things to do tomorrow. If you haven't done it yet, get familiar with the 3 pillars and download, access that white paper, which is a pretty robust paper. It'll walk you through the 3 pillars at a level of detail that I'm not able to go into here. Very useful. Another idea that you should consider is doing a 3 pillars assessment of your organization to see where you are with maturity in cloud-centric leadership, your maturity in cloud governance, and your maturity with cloud management tools. Lastly, apply the 3 pillars to your enterprise. So develop the 3 pillars roadmap, which will help you demonstrate cloud-centric leadership. It'll help you define and implement a cloud governance framework to mitigate the risks, to enable the business case to be realized, and then do the research and implement the appropriate cloud management capabilities for your target cloud environments. Of course, the S in environments is in parens, because while you may have a private cloud going on now potentially, almost everybody is going to be operating in a hybrid cloud model going forward. So we think if you embrace these 3 pillars, it will guide you to success. Now, we do things that can help you do this. As you are familiar with our content or not, you'll see we provide a lot of things for free on our website that will help you get going. So you can do a 3 pillars assessment. We can help you with that. We know how to do these things. We can actually help you devise a 3 pillars maturity model for your organization based on different levels of maturity that we've been thinking about. We can help you apply the 3 pillars to your organization and bring along with that things like the strategy templates, the playbook methodologies, et cetera. So there's a lot of things we have in our arsenal that can be of service to anybody. So those are certainly some things to consider. We definitely believe that these 3 pillars are the critical pillars for cloud success. They will accelerate your cloud strategy, and if you do ignore them, it will come at some cost. So those are the 3 pillars. Very excited about them and what they mean to cloud computing success. And now with that, I think we've managed to save about 10 minutes for Q&A, so let me turn it over to Doug for questions.
Thanks, Eric. We do have a few questions that have come in, so I'll just start with this first one here. It says that you say that IT must be a broker and integrator of IT resources and capabilities. IT is traditionally a service organization support the business providing IT resources and capabilities. What is different when you say cloud-centric leadership is needed?
So what I mean by that is the difference is a little bit subtle, but what I'm suggesting is that IT organizations need to, for example, take cloud computing services and solutions that are available on the open market and proactively establish the relationships with different cloud service providers and vendors on behalf of the business, but before the business has asked for them, and then based on knowing what the business needs, create and provide those services to the business through the IT catalog, but again, in a proactive way, in a way that doesn't require the business to do it first. Right now, again, I can point to a client organization, multiple, where the business has gone out around IT and has already established relationships and are consuming cloud resources. Why didn't the IT organization know that the business wanted those services? Why didn't the IT organization be on the tip of the spear in the forefront of establishing those relationships? Why did the IT organization not find out about that business relationship with the cloud provider until a year after it happened? That's what I mean by cloud-centric leadership, is getting out in front of that and being a proactive provider, negotiator, broker of all those cloud services. Hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Eric. Our next question is, how does cloud governance establish a cloud-centric IT operating model based on speed, agility, and cost of cloud computing? This person says, I can see how governance impacts speed, agility, and cost, but why is it the basis of the model?
Well, boy, that's not a good question. I think that the cloud governance essentially helps create a agile decision-making model that stays up with the pace of cloud computing. So again, we all talk about IT governance as being a process that takes a long time, it's slow, nobody can make decisions, so on and so forth. I'm preaching to the choir on that. So in our view, not only does cloud governance require a model of governance, it also requires that governance process to be super fast and super agile. So why does the governance model need to match the pace of the technology? Because cloud computing is essentially, if I describe what cloud computing is, I describe it as 5 minutes. That's how long it takes to go onto Amazon and download and access a web service, to set up a cloud. 5 minutes. It takes me 5 minutes or less to download a new app on my iPhone or on my Droid. So everything today is about real-time consumption, democratization, consumerization of IT, and we've reduced IT infrastructure, application access, those things down to a 5-minute user experience. So if the governance model for cloud takes 3 months to make a decision on what infrastructure services we should provide, that's too long. So the cloud governance life cycle that we're describing says get the governance in place, make sure that it performs and makes decisions at least as fast as it takes to make a decision to access a cloud service and make it real. So, I know that's an idealistic thing to have a governance model that can perform in 5 minutes, but why not? Why not, try and be ambitious with a governance mechanism so that they can be just as real time as it is to consume cloud services from a vendor today? I hope I answered the question.
Thanks. We have another question here. It says, I'm just concerned with migrating my apps to a service provider like Amazon. How do the 3 pillars play into my broader IT strategy?
Wow. So the decisions around what applications to migrate is it's a governance decision, and everybody should be circumspect with respect to what applications, what capabilities should be migrated into a given cloud. And so while the decisions around which things to migrate can be made and must be made in the context of cloud architecture, of cloud services, of security, and all those good things, there's some specialization needed to really understand which apps and capabilities should be migrated to a cloud, because not all of them are architected to be able to move to a cloud, first and foremost, and some are going to take some significant investment in modernization in order to take advantage of cloud computing. So, there's a longer-winded answer to that question, but the short answer is the governance model will help you establish criteria for deciding things that should be migrated to the cloud, things that should not. We actually have a companion methodology called Solar Cloud that actually is specifically targeted toward legacy portfolio migration to the cloud. That's also been talked about in a previous webinar, so if that's an interest of anybody that's in attendance, go take a look at that stuff. But the cloud governance lifecycle contemplates making decisions on what to migrate, but there's, again, some more science around specifically looking at the legacy portfolio and making those migration decisions. Some are fairly easy. Some are going to take some more detailed analysis. So I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Eric. We have a couple more. Hopefully we can get to all of them. Our next one asks, virtual data centers are the new quote, or are the quote-unquote new thing. Is this being looked at by the IT providers at any level?
I have to say yes. Absolutely is. So when we're talking about virtual data center ideas, think about infrastructure as a service, and then think about that in a macro level. So data center, is essentially a big chunk of infrastructure as a service. So it's going to be consumed and provided very similar to other cloud services available today. And this whole data center virtualization idea will provide yet another level of agility and flexibility to an organization that wants to extend its capabilities, give itself COOP and other backup scenarios for IT operations. So that's a very exciting space. Again, the whole virtual data center as a service idea is basically packaging up a data center accessible through an API or a template. And so voila, I can have a virtual data center at my fingertips if I go through the process of consuming a virtual data center template. That's kind of the idea. So these are definitely coming, definitely going to be cost savers for organizations that want to do business that way. I guarantee you every new startup right now is looking at either the virtual data center model or Amazon EC2 as their initial infrastructure, and nobody is starting out a small business today by buying infrastructure. They're starting out their business with their business model, and they're renting infrastructure as they need it.
Thanks, Eric. And it's 1 o'clock, but we have one last question, so maybe we can get this one in quick.
Let's do it.
Is there an authoritative source for cloud templates or API documentation that you can point us to?
I don't know of one. I would say this, if that's an area of interest, we have some pretty good documentation that's available. A lot of the big cloud providers are operating using cloud templates today, so you can go to some of the vendors. But a single authoritative source of information, you can look to the analyst community, the Gartners, the Forresters, etc. Typically, my view, Forrester has better technical analysis, so they'd be the one that would have more of a technical viewpoint on this. That's where I'd probably go if I was looking at the analyst community. If you want some real, in-depth analysis of this space, reach out to us and we can arrange a discussion based on the market and trade study work that we've done for our clients. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Eric. So as we finish up, we'd like to take this time to thank you all for dialing in today. If you're interested in learning more about AgilePath's capabilities and solutions, please visit our website. You can find it at agile-path.com. Again, that's agile-path.com. Thank you again for attending this Agile Path webinar, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, everybody.